Alright, so I look at this problem, it's asking me to factor this polynomial, but the steps we went through yesterday say, well, is it factored? Yesterday, a problem like this was factored, right? I see the parentheses, I see the binomials, right? This problem is not. So we're going to have to use our factoring skills to get it to be factored. Well, the first thing I'm always going to think about, always, is there a greatest common factor? Class, is there a greatest common factor there?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to show you guys a step. I would teach this to any student who's just first time learning greatest common factor. I write out all the factors of x to the third. And then all the factors of 4x. Class, do they have anything in common? They have an x in common. That's the greatest common factor. Then I just write everything that was not underlined or circled there. That would be x squared minus 4. Class, is that one factored? Are we done? No, we're not. So you can pay attention that I'm going to write something, as I showed you guys in the previous video, there's something called a placeholder. And why I call it a placeholder is because you're skipping, right? You have x to the second power, but you don't have x to the first power here. You put a 0 there. It keeps its place. And over here, we already know that this is x to the 0 power. As a super quick review of factoring, everyone say inside the parentheses. I highlight that in yellow. This is my method. I use the x in the box. I take the a times c, so looking inside here, class, what's my a value? And your c value. So a times c is -4. And what's your b value? 0. I'm trying to think of two numbers that multiply to be -4, but two numbers that add to be 0. What are those numbers?
-4 and 4.
+2 and -2. Now, if you watched my previous videos or your factoring test corrections, you guys remember that? The hint or the trick is, well, if a value is equal to 1, you only have to do the x. You don't have to do the box. So I have x times x plus 2, x minus 2. Class, is that in factored form?
Yes.
Yeah, and now I can just go through the steps of graphing it, which I'll do super quick. I'm going to find now my basic graph, so that's an x, 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 and if you multiply those, class, you get x to the third. Class, is that an odd or an even? If you don't know what a cubic function looks like, you can go look at your basic graph, x to the first, and you'll notice that it does what? Starts down, ends where? Up. Is that called leading coefficient or end behavior? That's the end behaviors of the graph, the ends of the graph. So it's going to look something like that. Now we can just do something called multiplicity. You can use a quick chart. Helps me stay organized. Class, here, x is equal to 0, right? 0 product rule. X is equal to, and x is equal to +2. What's the multiplicity at, or the highest degree at x equals 0? So there's a 1 right there, so 1. -2? And x equals 2. 1. And all of those are odds, which means you're going to shoot through the x-axis. So again, this graphing part should be the review part. Let's quickly graph this. So again, the goal for this whole week is that you can be able to graph a polynomial without your graphing calculator. X equals 0, x equals -2, x equals 2. And I'm going to look for my end behavior here, starting down, ends up. So this is kind of like you're going from left to right, your starting point and your end point. I forgot to write my x-intercept numbers, which is helpful. And if you really want it to be really fancy, you can also graph it with your y-intercept. So 0, if I put in a 0 there, that turns everything to 0. Does that make sense? 0 times 2 times -2, that'll all equal 0. So it's actually going to go through the origin as my y-intercept. So if I graph it, I'm going to shoot through -2. It's just going to go through it. And then it has to go back at 0. And then kind of shoot through again at 2. And end up there. So this is a graph of my polynomial. Only big idea difference from yesterday is you have to factor.